Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Need a powerful and entertaining way to ignite your next conference, retreat, or team building session? My keynotes don't include magic, but they do have the power to help your attendees take a leap forward by putting emotional intelligence into their employee engagement, and customer-centric leadership practices. So bring the infotainment creativity of the Fast Leader Show to your next event, and I'll help your attendees get over the hump now. Go to beyondmorale.com/speaking to learn more. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because we're going to talk about something that's critically important to not just, profit organizations, but also nonprofit organizations. All organizations that are trying to really connect with customers. Claire Brooks was born in West Africa to English parents and lived in West Africa and India until she was 8 years old. She was educated in England at Cambridge University, studying ancient Greek and Latin and social sciences. She started her career in Europe, coming to the U.S. in 1997. All her life, Claire has been what's called a third culture kid, a child whose formative years were spent outside her parents' culture. Her early childhood was spent changing schools every 2 years and having to make new friends and taking long-haul flights back and forth to see family. To this day, it's tough for her to answer the question, where are you from? However, when she moved to the U.S., she turned her early experiences into a business. Third culture kids are known for being culturally attuned, and this, together with her master's in social sciences, enables her to earn a living as a culture consultant. Claire works with Fortune 500 brands around the world, helping them to understand the culture and emotions of their consumers and shoppers and developing winning strategies. Despite her global perspectives, Claire believes that the only real legacy she will leave is her children and a life lived productively and humbly in the service of others. It's not about me could be her mantra. Claire is driven by curiosity and self-knowledge. She believes the ancient Greeks counseled us well to know thyself before attempting to know anything else. She's built a global consulting business on the premise of helping others to explore and know their non-conscious emotions, motivations, and cultural beliefs as they relate to their behavior as consumers. Claire is currently the president of Model People, Inc., a global brand insights and consulting company. She is also the author of Marketing with Strategic Empathy, Inspiring Strategy with Deeper Consumer Insight. Claire currently resides in Chicago and Manchester, England. Claire Brooks, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Sure. Good to see you.
I'm glad to have you here. Now, I've given our listeners a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Well, I think you covered it pretty well, Jim. I mean, my current passion is really helping Fortune 500 marketing companies to understand their consumers and customers. And it's not just the old kind of chestnut, you should understand your customers. It's about a deeper level of understanding. And it's what I call empathy. So the book is called Strategic Empathy because everything that you do strategically as an organization needs to start with real empathy with your customers as real people, how they think, how they feel, how they behave, and how they relate to the products and services that your organization is trying to sell them. So that's the passion. And it's not just about profit organizations either. This strategic empathy idea is equally applicable to nonprofits. And so I've recently found an additional passion doing pro bono work for organizations like the World Federation for Mental Health, helping them to understand. It's very talented people that work in the mental health field. But work from a clinical point of view or from a donor point of view or from a volunteer point of view, and understanding the experience of mental health and how to connect that is very important to me at the moment.
Well, and Claire, when you and I had the opportunity to chat a little bit off mic about this particular, issue about becoming really a more connectable, relatable, and desired, type of organization, regardless of where it comes from. And it seems simple. I mean, people are people, right? I mean, how can this be that hard? However, as I was going through the book, there's one thing to me that popped up in the work that I do with organizations. And of course, you confirmed and affirmed what I was talking about. But it's really this issue around framing.
Yeah.
And that organizations, people, when we're in an organization, it's really difficult for us to relate outside of our own four walls. Mm-hmm. So how does an organization really go about preventing themselves from being handcuffed by that problem?
Mm. I really liked the way that you put that, Jim, this idea of framing, because we all have our own mental frameworks. We all have the culture we grew up in, the beliefs we grew up with, and that frames the way that we see the world and the way that we relate to others and understand others. Organizations are just the same. Successful organizations have a very powerful internal culture. And so people learn how to think. They learn what mental framework will get them promoted. And companies have silos as well. They have divisions between different functions within the company. So sometimes the marketing people don't talk to the product people, or the engineers don't talk to the designers, or they're talking, but they're talking in a way that is within that mental framework of the organization. So what I try to do is to break down silos, to get multifunctional teams to go on what I call a strategic learning journey. So really connect with their customers or consumers in the field, physically, observe them using the company's products, talk to them as real people, understand their lives, where they come from, what their cultural beliefs are. And when this happens, there tends to be an aha moment. Okay, I was thinking about that from our point of view, but that really made me think I need to do things differently. I need to design a product differently. I need to speak to my customers in a different way. And it's only really through that looking at customers and consumers as people, not as numbers in an XLS or a balance sheet or whatever, looking at customers as people. And that's a different framework for a lot of organizations, believe it or not.
Well, and so for you, you mentioned something about observing customers in their own environment, the ethnographic, type of study work. So when you start looking at the amount, I should say the types of clients that you work with and the work that you're doing, how much of it does involve actually going through and doing those ethnographic studies?
That's where, if you like, the rubber hits the road, actually going out and doing these ethnographic studies. And a lot of organizations do that. But a lot of some of the companies that help them to do ethnographic research don't always help them to break outside of these silos. So they're still looking at people as objects. And you really that's where the idea of empathy comes in. I know you do a lot of work with emotional intelligence, Jim. You were telling me that. And I think it's that idea that you have to empathize with somebody as a customer or a consumer before you can really serve them well. So you can't look at them as a subject of research. You really have to get down and have the conversations with people one-on-one. Now, ethnographic research isn't the only way that you do this. There's data. Companies have more data than ever about their customers. And if you relate data to observation, then you get a complete picture. Ethnographic research won't tell you everything you need to know because it's small scale. You need the big scale data approach. But you can't look at data alone. You have to relate the two. And you have to develop this emotional intelligence, this empathy within managers, and employees within an organization. Because if you're just looking at customers as people who pay the bills and bring in the revenue, then it's not going to work. There isn't going to be a dedication to really serving your customers.
I think it's important that you bring that up. Thanks for sharing, because when you start thinking even about ethnographic studies, you have a bias that occurs because of the observation in itself. In other words, people don't necessarily behave when you're actually watching them in the same way they would if you were not.
And that's true. And bias is a big issue in ethnographic research. And you obviously read the book, Jim, which is good. But we can do a lot to minimize that. But ethnographic research isn't the only way to observe. If you think about entrepreneurs and the way that they build their businesses, they usually do it by really knowing what's going on with their customers. So they get out there, they talk to them, they observe them. And and they have a very visceral, empathetic feel for their customers. When organizations get big, replicating that entrepreneurial understanding is very difficult. And that's the work that we try to do by taking multifunctional teams, cross-functional teams on these learning journeys. We try to replicate that entrepreneurial gut feel for a customer.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because typically when, we get to be a larger organization, is everybody's focused in on their niche and their, particular technical expertise, and they're doing that, heads down, with such fervor and doing an excellent job at it, that they don't stop, and do that, mindfulness reflection and do that, existential type of work to be able to say, okay, how is what that I'm doing right here, right now, really impacting and making an effect on the customer, and where can I fill in gaps, and thinking about them, like you said, as people, not objects. I mean, that is really hard for them to do. And a lot of times on the show, we'll look at quotes to help us give us the right direction. And is there a quote or two that you can share that helps do that for you?
Well, the quote that we've been talking about this really. Customer empathy has to be the foundation for everything you do. So by all means, do the market research, do the desk research, get the data, prove out the size of the market. But at the end of the day, never forget that you are serving real people. And you have to have not only a functional data-driven knowledge of those people and how they behave, but you have to have a real, raw, observed understanding, empathy with how those people behave, how those people feel about your products, use your products, and feel about you as a company. And the best CEOs do that. I very often have a group CEOs, very senior executives, on my learning journeys. They might not be able to come for the whole week that we're doing this work, but they'll come for a day. And one example of that is a customer that had a product recall, and they really wanted to understand, the very senior executives, not only what was going on with the recall, but whether it had affected the brand, whether it had a huge brand, a global brand, whether American consumers were turning against the brand as a result of this recall. And so we were able to stage a day where we talked empathetically with a number of the product's users. And there were some real ahas that came out of that. The brand was okay, but there were things that the CEO and the senior executives needed to do to make sure that customers were better communicated with. So there was a level of understanding that was generated that helped them actually feel better from the C-suite. They were looking at a bit of a disaster. It helped them feel better. It helped them communicate with the organization. It's not as bad as we thought, but here's what we need to do to make sure that customers know that we're on this and we're dealing with this, and we heard you, we listened to you.
You mentioned something about working with cross-functional teams. And so for me, I find that working with different groups has a very different set of dynamics along with it. So when you start, thinking about all of those different cross-functional groups, how can you get them to come together faster?
Well, through the research, through the learning journey. So what we'll do is we'll mix up the teams. We'll put a product person with a marketing person, a technical person with a non-technical person. We'll make them listen to the same consumer conversations. And so they hear the same things. So when we bring them back into the room, and we always do this, by the way, it's what we call an activation phase. So we don't just let them listen to consumers and go off. That wouldn't have any teeth at all. The strategy part, the strategic empathy part, is about action. So empathy is not strategic unless you take action. So we bring people back together after we've done these consumer conversations, and we have them distill what they've heard. And we have them play it back. And very often they haven't heard it properly. So we have to maybe play them some video or correct assumptions, correct what they've heard. Then we have them work with what they've heard. What does this mean for me in my function, in my silo? And then in cross-functional teams, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to design things differently and communicate things differently? So this can be very fast, to answer your question about speed. We can get these conversations up and running in a week, have the activation session immediately afterwards. So within a couple of weeks, you might have a radical turnaround in the way that functions within an organization relate to one another, understand the customer, and have decided to work together to do something about this. So activation is the key.
And I think your starting point is important for all of us to make sure that we're very intentional about. And what you had talked about was, mixing up the groups. And if for those that are familiar with appreciative inquiry and positive psychology, what that is talking about unlikely pairs. You're matching unlikely folks with one another so that they actually gain different perspectives. That is like a critical foundational point when you start talking about, working with cross-functional teams and trying to get them to bond and understand one another better. That is a key point, cornerstone.
Can I build on that, Jim? Because I'm glad you brought up appreciative inquiry. That often involves bringing in people from outside the organization. So sometimes we're involved in, getting speakers to talk from a very different perspective. Maybe a fashion person to talk to a car company. Maybe a doctor to talk to the people designing the seats. And often consumers come in too. So we've actually, involved customers in the debate. We've had executives in a retail fashion store talk to their customers one-on-one about products that they've bought. Why did you buy that? What experience did you have? And so the appreciative inquiry approach is very powerful.
Very much so. So I know when we're starting to talk about a lot of these dynamics of dealing with all these different peoples, and everybody has their own, humps that they've had to get over. And that really has to also be part of our understanding of learning about folks and how they interact with us. But, we have humps that we have to get over. So can you have a time where you had to get over the hump and it made a difference for you, and you can share that story?
Mine's a good one. I came to the US 1997. I actually followed my husband to Detroit. He is an engineer and got a job in Detroit, and eventually I followed him. And it was a challenge for me. It was a cultural challenge for me, because English people tend to think America's like England, right? We all talk the same language, right? And it really isn't. So I ended up, got a fantastic job actually, working in an ad agency in a senior role, $1 billion advertising budget, top car brand, a very American car brand as well. And at one of my very first meetings, I was dealing with a very experienced, very no-nonsense brand manager, very, very senior guy. And I got very flustered. I was hot off the plane. I started mixing up my car parts. So I started saying, in England, we talk about bonnets, not hoods, and we talk about trunks, not boots. And the client put up with me for a couple of minutes, and then he leaned over to his second in command and said, "What is she talking about?" So I could have died. This was my chance to impress this guy, and I could have died. But I picked myself up and I decided that, okay, I wasn't culturally understanding what was going on. And we were dealing with trucks as well. That was the other thing. Trucks don't really exist in England. So I had to go out. I had to learn about trucks. I had to learn about truck culture. And it really brought me up short. Okay, I'm a third culture kid. I need to be able to get into truck culture now. And out of this really came my passion for understanding culture, in a commercial sense, a product culture, truck culture, but also helping other people understand that, because it's no good if I just understand it. That's just academically interesting. I had to lead teams of clients and teams of creatives within the agency to help them understand, so that they could empathize, so that they could, create advertising that really spoke to customers and really understand the culture that they were dealing with. So I proved myself ultimately as a translator of truck culture. But that was a real learning for me.
Well, I think it was important how you rebounded from that, right?
Yes, yes.
One of the things
I felt like getting back on the plane at the time. It was awful. But yes, you have to rebound. The biggest things, learning situations, are mistakes, and that's true for clients as well. We designed that wrong. We did that wrong. Okay, we better deal with that, and that's true as an individual. You have to get over the hump.
Definitely, and I think part of what you're talking about too is that somebody was talking the other day that I was having a conversation with about reputation, in that really when you think consistently and that you're always trying to build a reputation that is of high caliber, that when you do fall, and you will, it's a lot easier for you to dust yourself off and rebound from that. And so you have to think long term. In the moment, short term, you fell. Oh well, give yourself a chance to get up. All right, so I know you and I talked a little bit, and you talked about the work that you're doing now, having a split, living, trading across the pond as far as and in Chicago. You're in Chicago right now as we're talking, and it's winter time. You think you'd maybe escape some of that extreme cold and go to the UK, but you didn't do that. So we're glad you're here. But you have a lot of things going on. What's one of your goals?
I love what I do. And I also think that's really important, because if you don't have a passion for what you do, getting up every morning and spending 10 hours a day at it becomes very hard. So my passion is to continue to do this, we're bringing on new clients all of the time. I was talking to, a couple of new clients yesterday who have stuff that they want to do for them. And so for me, having done this for 15 years now, it becomes very interesting, because you start to make the connections. We don't specialize in any particular industry. We work in food and beverage and fashion and automotive. And that's good, because that's how customers are. They don't just buy your product. And so I can also help my clients make connections between categories. The kind of person who drives your car also shops at these stores, also eats this way, likes these food brands. And so that becomes more and more interesting as time goes on. And then I mentioned the nonprofit work. So that's really a goal, to take some of what I've learned and give back, because you have to do that. You have to think about your society as well as your family and your business. And I think most entrepreneurs do that. I think you get to the stage where you realize that you can make a difference elsewhere, and that's increasingly important to me.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. The number one thing that contributes to customer loyalty is emotions. So move onward and upward faster by gaining significantly deeper insight and understanding of your customer journey and personas with emotional intelligence. With your empathy mapping workshop, you'll learn how to evoke and influence the right customer emotions that generate improved customer loyalty and reduce your cost to operate. Get over your emotional hump now by going to empathymapping.com to learn more. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Claire, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Claire Brooks, are you ready to hoe down?
I am.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
It's time, Jim. You can't do everything. And the more you do, the more you want to do. So focus. You really have to focus on where you can add value, bring your skills, whether it's to clients or to society.
What do you think is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
I was 22, first job with an American company, actually, I was sitting there trying to figure it out. And my manager said, don't leap over the hurdle, jump in. So engage, come up with an idea, run with it, and you will figure it out as you go along.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
Hard work, attention to detail. I don't think business is glamorous, but it can be a lot of fun. It's worth it. The work's worth it.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
I think lack of ego, and I hope that everybody that knows me would agree with that. You don't have to be front and center to be a leader. Let other people do what they're good at. Help them win. Help them own what they've done and be proud of it, because that's when they'll really learn and implement what they've learned.
What would be one book? And it could be from any genre that you recommend to our Legion. And of course, we'll put a link to your book on the show notes page as well.
Well, I did an MBA, and when I was an MBA student, we were recommended to read a very slim volume. It's called Getting to Yes by Fisher and Ury. You may know it, but it really advocates win-win situations. So don't go in seeking to win. Look for the other side to win as well. And, I've applied this really widely, from dealing with my son when he was a toddler to negotiating very big contracts. Again, put your ego aside. Look for win-win situations.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Clara Brooks. Okay, Clara, this is my last Hump Day Hold On question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what piece of knowledge or skill would you take back with you, and why?
I think be curious. Don't be afraid to explore and learn, and don't give up at the first hurdle. So when I started my business, I was asked if I could do things. I was asked if I could work in Japan or in India. I didn't have a clue how to do it, but I went and found out. I went and found partners who could help me with that. So never say no. My very first job, I was told I'd be judged on knowledge, skills, and attitude. And I could learn the first two. I couldn't learn attitude. That was internal. So go for it. You will succeed.
Claire, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Yes, they can Google me, Claire Brooks Model People, and that will take you to the website, www.modelpeopleinc.com. And there you'll see contact details for me, and you'll be able to see some video on there of me talking about the book. So that'll tell you a bit more about what we do.
Claire Brooks, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.